I've been following the low volume climbing road race plan for my A event. Obviously, this is now canceled, but as I was getting great results from the training with little or no outdoor riding, I decided to stick with it. And really, I guess what he's saying there, we should sub in outdoor riding with structure or like unstructured rides, right? Like that's like the key thing there. So, of course, when you stick with structure inside or out, you get faster. That's what happens, right? So he says, I decided to stick with it. And this isn't something I've done with great discipline in the past, but the progress and gains were really motivating. The low volume plan is the most I could really do and means about 4-ish hours of training and riding a week. Not a huge amount of TSS as a result, but enough to keep my FTP on an upward curve and respectable level of fitness. He mentions that his FTP went up to 262 and he's at 75 kilograms. So that's another really good example of the fact, kind of like what you were talking about early on, Chad. Some athletes, they don't bat an eye at 800 TSS. For others, it's all relative to the athlete. 200 TSS might be something that's really tough for you to achieve, and you work your way steadily up. That's the key, right? To where you find a sustainable level, and then that's where you will reside. So he says, however, the event in question was a bit of a brute. 220 kilometers of riding and 3,500 meters or so of climbing. It's called the Dragon Ride in South Wales. And he says, which probably would have meant a 9-hour day or more in the saddle for me. Recently, it's dawned on me that there was a massive deficit or difference between my weekly TSS and the TSS of the event, as well as how long I am conditioned to sit in the saddle. So he actually estimated the TSS, since it was going to be a 9-hour ride, at 900 TSS. And if you could do that, that would be your FTP is way wrong, or you are a superhuman and we need to study you, because 100 TSS for an hour means that you just rode at threshold for an hour. So if you can do that for 9 hours, you would be breaking the laws of threshold and many other things as well. So
the laws of threshold.
Yeah. So, but granted, what he's talking about is the big bump. And you can see this if you use TrainerRoad and you're looking at your training plan, and then you have like a race like Leadville, or a race like anything, like any sort of long, big event. And if that's in your calendar and you've been doing low volume training, it'll look like, whoa, big spike on race day. That's what he's talking about. So he says, how could I have overcome this deficit? Or more to the point, does it even matter? Was I overreaching with my goal event and just setting myself up for an absolute shoeing come the event? So he also says a couple more details on this. I've listened to recent podcasts about the perils of adding in extra volume, but I did it anyway because of this deficit. I love that. It's been quite pleasing to see the training benefits in the real world, but it left me unable to complete all of the VO2 sessions when I've come back to the plan. The reason why is relatively obvious in terms of self-prescribed extra TSS, but if I couldn't cope with this to top up, I can't help but think I would have been massively underprepared for my event. Let's assume there's no other external forces at work. I'm sleeping well and eating well. Well, firstly, that's like a huge assumption, right? Assuming that there are no other things affecting it. And this totally speaks to Chad's point when he said, likely there is not only one cause for any issue that we bump up against as an athlete. It's almost always many factors that are factoring into causing where we're at. So whether that be positive or negative. But we always love simplifying it down to one thing. When we have that great day, it's totally because we just bought that, $2,000 wheel set because we want to feel good about buying it. Or, it's for one reason or another. Maybe that ice cream actually was good is the common one that we always tell ourselves, right? So chances are there are a lot of different things. But so this is actually a question that I've gotten quite a few times when people have they've sent just on Instagram, they reach out to me and they go, whoa, look at this. I'm doing Leadville and I'm doing a low volume plan, and look at how big the TSS differential is on race week, right? But I think maybe one of the most important things that people should understand is the fact that not all TSS is created equal. So let's flip this on its head, right? Let's say you're doing 850 TSS a week, and that's in really low intensity work. So you are not breaking Z2, and you are just staying at Z2, and you're doing that all week. If you show up to go do a criterium, and that criterium is 45 minutes and it is on the gas, and you do 45 TSS, you won't be prepared for that 45 TSS, right? Even if you've done just 800 TSS at zone 2 the whole time, and then you have to show up and deal with constant punches way over threshold and repeated efforts, it's going to be tough. So using just TSS to see if you are prepared for an event, it breaks down in the sense that not all TSS is created equal. And we always talk about this, but we train energy systems. We don't just train basic overall numbers to get you to a specific point. And that's something that's, I think, really, Nate, you showed that at Leadville, right? In the sense that you didn't go out and do a bunch of 9-hour rides. I did the same thing. I didn't go out and do a bunch of 9-hour rides, but you still did well.
Yeah. I just did 2-hour sweet spot rides, and part of it, I'm not saying I probably could have done better if I would have done some like 5-hour outside rides that I could actually recover from, not 9 hours because I can't recover from those, and built up to that. But part of it was just to say, like, there's so much, at least back then too, talk of like, you can't do it this way. It's impossible. And I wanted to be like, no, you can do it this way. And I did it.
Yeah.
So there.
Yeah, well done with that, Nate. Yeah,
just tell me I can't do something, especially if it's Chad. then I'll do it.
It's effective. But it's tantamount, if you're not familiar with the TSS nomenclature, if the training stress score, it's tantamount to just measuring kilojoules or kilocalories. I mean, you can bank or burn or expend 1,000 kcals or kjs riding at 60%, and you can get there much quicker riding at 90%. And they're going to take very different tolls on your body, and they're going to elicit different physiologic responses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super important to understand.
There was 1 year I was trying to prepare for like what I knew was going to be a really, really big KJ week for a team camp. And so leading into it as kind of an experiment, I would just go out and see if I could hit 3,000 KJs in a ride. And that was sort of a game that I would play. It was like, how fast can I hit 3,000 KJs? And what I discovered was really hitting the gas and then taking off the gas and doing a really punchy ride would get me to, a higher KJ number faster than just trying to hit like a really sustained effort over that course. And again, like it was I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a training strategy, but it was again, like approaching it with curiosity and looking at it as a learning process. It was really interesting to me to see that, because it was the training adaptations that I was actually getting from those different rides was wildly different depending on the strategy I used to try to get to that KJ goal.
And Reese, I want you to take heart in a couple of examples. And I don't just plan to offer anecdotal evidence here today, but I can look at things I've done and I can see how that's happened to many, many other riders that I've coached, that I've simply observed that we know common sense. This applies to not just me, it applies to basically everybody. First off, we're all going to Cape Epic in March, pandemic, fingers crossed. We're going to be there, and we have to have certain energy systems in line. We have to be good at sweet spot work. We have to have a bit of anaerobic capacity, a bit of neuromuscular, a ton of skill. And we have to have a fair amount of time in the saddle, a lot of aerobic endurance. All these things are going to be acquired. And I don't think any of us are going to go out and do a string of 6 or 7 hour days in a row. It's not going to happen. And we're still going to race well. I know we are. I've seen it happen too many times to know that it.
Nate, sorry, if you're listening on the podcast.
Me and Pete are.
Yeah. If you're listening on the podcast, Nate just smirked. So yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah.
But to back that up even more, my best road seasons, most of my races, at least the road races, were 3 hours plus. They were like 3.5 hours in my category in the Masters, et cetera. And I never did a training ride over 90 minutes, not one time. There were a couple seasons where I was so strapped for time. If I could get in a 90-minute workout, and occasionally I could do 2 of those in a day because I was leading classes, that was a big day, but those were exceptional days. Typically it was a 90-minute workout, and that was all I could get in on any one single day. And I raced extremely well that season and next season because I addressed all the necessary energy systems in training, and then I applied them rather effectively in racing. So it panned out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good example of that. I think that like if we separate the whole thing for what you're looking at, in this case, Reese, you're looking to be specifically prepared for a specific event, right? Chances are, if it's climbing like that and it's long sustained climbs, chances are you pick the climbing, or plan builder pick the climbing road race for you if that's what you selected, or something like the rolling road race. And it's that sort of specificity that matters a whole lot more because those are the energy systems that you use on race day, rather than just worrying about the overall number, the amount of TSS that you would have. And Amber, you mentioned something, and I see, Chad, that you have a note on this about like, fitness that's tough to maintain. That sort of approach of like, I'm just going to get to 3,000 KJs and I'm just going to try to do it as best as I can. It's funny because it like builds you in, what we do, we are good at. And that's something that's really important to remember. We've already mentioned, I think, twice in different ways on this episode, but the more you do something, you'll be good at that specific thing. But that doesn't always necessarily mean that it was going to make you a better athlete for whatever task you have to accomplish. Like Amber, if you would have kept doing that, you would have been great at getting to 3,000 KJs in a specific way. But that's the sort of thing that breaks down on race day, right, Chad?
Yeah, certain types of fitness are easy gets. You can get them quickly, but you can also lose them rather quickly, and they're super hard to hang on to. And I've referred to this, and other coaches have as well, as brittle fitness. So it's not supple, it's not flexible like aerobic capacity or even muscle endurance. Sweet spot work and slightly below, and even max strength if we're talking about being in the gym. So you can get this fitness quickly, it dissipates quickly, it's hard to hang on to, and that's my point.
Yeah. Amber.
point.
Yeah. Fantastic point.
I don't know where to go with that.
I think you should always stop everything with that. And that's my point.
Yeah. That'll be Chad's
very-
signature. Amber, one thing that we have here on our notes too, that I think is important is you're mentioning the fact that like it is totally doable to train for these events. And that's coming from you as a pro athlete. Like you've had experience doing this very thing.
Yeah, I often would train for huge stage races, 10-day stage races. It's not like I'm going to go out and simulate a 10-day stage race necessarily in my training. Number one, I think in cycling, when you're talking about these big events, Nate mentioned this earlier, it's just too hard to recover from efforts like this. And so you're better off with consistency, as Chad said, targeting these specific systems and then making sure that you can recover consistently from them. And one of the things so the point is that you can actually handle a really, really high TSS one-day event doing a low volume plan that doesn't have the same level of TSS week after week. And one way of thinking about this is, your FTP, it's your functional threshold power. It's the power at which you can theoretically, effectively shuttle lactate really well. So if you think about your FTP as a metric for shuttling, it's not like you have a separate shuttling system for a 1-hour ride that's different from the shuttling system for a 3-hour ride that's different from a shuttling system for a 6-hour ride. It's all the same system. So if your FTP is at a level where you know that you can shuttle at this particular power output, it's the same thing for a 1-hour ride as it would be for an 8-hour ride. Now that's of course subject to your pacing strategy and how well you're fueling and staying hydrated, but shuttling is shuttling. So when you train that system, even if you're training that system at a low volume, it's there. It's there no matter how long you want to go for a ride or how long your event is. That said, there are other metrics of endurance, right? So the fueling I mentioned, that's going to be a really important one. It's not just about making sure you're fueling enough and consistently through the event, but also you have palate fatigue, focus. So just maintaining a mental focus and the mental fatigue associated with being on the bike for a really long time. And that's of course related to fueling. And then you did mention being in the saddle, and that's its own special kind of endurance that we all know. But honestly, like all of these things, I think are very trainable on a low volume plan. And if you want to, you can, if you toss in maybe a few longer rides where you sort of test what it's like to be in the saddle for 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. You don't have to go do 9 hours on the bike to prep for a 9-hour event though. So just, I think you can be confident that on a low volume plan, you can train effectively for a longer event. And if the low volume plan is the thing that you can do consistently and recover from and not get sick from and not get injured from, that is your absolute best bet for preparing for even a really, really big TSS event.
If you like this video, you should subscribe to our channel. Maybe even give this video a like with a thumbs up and a comment down below.
If you want to see race analysis videos, you can click on it right over here. And if you want to get your coaching questions answered, you can click on it right over here.
And if you want to become a faster cyclist, which you should go over to TrainerRoad.com. It'll make you faster. We promise. We guarantee it, right, Nate?
Guaranteed. Or your money back.
Yes, it's true, actually. We really will do that.
Yeah.